December 24th, 2007, Christmas Eve, Carnation, Washington, a small, quiet town about 25 miles east of Seattle. A family is gathering for the holidays. Parents, children, grandchildren, 3 generations coming together to celebrate. Judy Anderson is wrapping presents in the living room. Her husband Wayne is watching TV. Their daughter Michele and her boyfriend have just arrived. It looks like the start of a perfect Christmas. But Michele hasn't come to celebrate. She's come with 2 loaded handguns and a plan she's been preparing for 2 weeks. Within hours, 6 members of the Anderson family will be dead, shot in their own home, including 2 children, a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. And the most chilling part, after Michele and her boyfriend killed her parents, they cleaned up the blood, hid the bodies, and waited for the rest of the family to arrive. This is the story of the Carnation Christmas Eve Massacre, one of the most horrific family murders in American history. To understand how a daughter could murder her own family on Christmas Eve, you have to understand the Andersons. Wayne and Judy Anderson had lived on their wooded property in Carnation for over 30 years. Wayne was 60 years old, a retired Boeing engineer, a quiet, hard-working man. Judy was 61. She worked as a postal carrier in the small town. Her co-workers describe her as kind and dependable. They had 3 children, Mary, the eldest daughter, Scott, their son, and Michele, the youngest. By all outward appearances, the Andersons were a typical American family. But beneath the surface, there were tensions, resentments that had been building for years, especially with Michele. Michele Kristen Anderson was 29 years old in 2007. She had graduated from Cedar Crest High School in 1997, where she participated in cross-country and art club. Acquaintances describe her as artistic and initially sweet-tempered. But something had changed over the years. Michele struggled. She held various low-wage jobs, a night security guard at Nintendo, a fill-in postal carrier on her mother's route. By 2007, she was unemployed. She and her boyfriend, Joseph McEnroe, lived in a mobile home on her parents' property. They paid no rent. And according to Michele, that's when the problem started. Michele claimed her parents had begun pressuring her to start paying rent and utilities. She also claimed her older brother Scott owed her $40,000, money he had supposedly borrowed over the years and never repaid. And when Michele complained to her parents, she said they sided with Scott. In her mind, the family had turned against her. She felt judged, mistreated, stepped on. Whether these grievances were real or imagined, one thing is certain. Michele Anderson was keeping score. And on Christmas Eve 2007, she decided it was time to settle the debt. In blood, Michele didn't plan to carry out her revenge alone. She had a partner, Joseph Thomas McEnroe. Joe was also 29 years old. He had grown up in California, dropped out of high school, and drifted through a series of low-wage jobs: Burger King, Safeway, Target. His mother later described him as someone who spent a lot of time online, playing Dungeons and Dragons and meeting women on the internet. That's how he met Michele, on an online dating site. Joe was living in Arizona at the time, but after connecting with Michele, he moved to Washington. His mother said he was planning to settle down with her, maybe have a baby within 2 years. Instead, he would become her accomplice in mass murder. Prosecutors would later argue that Michele was the mastermind, the dominant one in the relationship. Joe's defense team claimed he was submissive, unable to resist Michele's demands. But whatever the dynamic between them, one thing is clear. When Michele told Joe her plan to murder her family, he didn't refuse. He didn't report her. He didn't try to stop her. He loaded a gun and went with her. Michele Anderson didn't snap. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated, calculated, planned for 2 weeks. When detectives later asked her how long she had been preparing, she answered plainly, 2 weeks. She had thought about who would be at the house, when they would arrive, how to eliminate witnesses. The family's annual Christmas Eve gathering was the perfect opportunity. Everyone would be in one place. Her parents, her brother Scott, his wife Erica, and their 2 young children, 5-year-old Olivia and 3-year-old Nathan. Even her older sister Mary was expected to attend, but Mary got sick and decided to stay home. That decision may have saved her life. Michele armed herself with a 9mm pistol. Joe carried a .357 Magnum. On the afternoon of December 24th, 2007, they drove their pickup truck from their mobile home to her parents' house, just a short walk away. A walk they had made hundreds of times before. But this time, they weren't coming as family. They were coming as executioners. Around 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve, Michele and Joe arrived at her parents' house. Inside, Judy Anderson was wrapping Christmas presents. Wayne was in the living room, watching television. They had no idea what was about to happen. Joe distracted Judy in the back room, while Michele confronted her father. She raised her gun and pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed. Wayne Anderson looked at his own daughter, standing in front of him with a weapon. In that moment, he must have realized the truth, but there was no time to react. Joe stepped in and shot Wayne in the head. Then he shot Judy twice. Both parents were dead within minutes. What happened next is almost harder to comprehend than the murders themselves. Michele and Joe didn't panic. They didn't flee. They got to work. They dragged Wayne and Judy's bodies outside and hid them in a shed behind the house. Then they spent the next hour mopping up the blood, cleaning the living room, removing any evidence of what had just happened, because Michele knew that more family members were on their way. Her brother Scott, his wife Erica, and their 2 young children. The real targets were still coming, and Michele was going to wait for them. About 2.5 hours later, Scott Anderson arrived with his family. His wife Erica, 32, their daughter Olivia, just 5 years old, their son Nathan, only 3. They had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. This was a family gathering. Christmas Eve, Grandma and Grandpa's house. The children were probably excited about presents. Erica may have been looking forward to a quiet evening with family. Scott had no idea his own sister was waiting for him with a loaded gun. The moment they were inside, Michele opened fire. She shot Scott multiple times. When he tried to charge at her, Joe fired as well. Scott Anderson fell to the floor of his parents' living room, dead. Then they turned on Erica. Erica had been shot, but she wasn't dead yet. Wounded and desperate, she crawled across the room. She reached for the cordless phone. She dialed 911. The call connected. For a few brief seconds, dispatchers could hear chaos in the background. Screaming. What sounded like people arguing at a party. But the connection didn't last long. Joe grabbed the phone from Erica's hand. He tore out the batteries. He smashed it on the floor, and then he delivered the fatal shot. But the worst was yet to come. There were still 2 witnesses left in the house. 5-year-old Olivia and 3-year-old Nathan. When detectives later asked Michele why they killed the children, her answer was chilling. I just thought if they saw their parents dead, they'd be scarred for life. Joe shot both children in the head, at extremely close range. In total, 16 shots were fired that night. 6 people were dead. 3 generations of the Anderson family, wiped out on Christmas Eve. The 911 call that Erica made lasted only a few seconds, but it captured something that would haunt the courtroom years later. On the recording, a woman's voice can be heard screaming. According to Erica's mother, Pam Mantle, those were her daughter's final words. Not the kids. No. Even as she was dying, Erica wasn't begging for her own life. She was trying to save her children. But Michele and Joe showed no mercy. Not for her. Not for Olivia. Not for Nathan. After the killings, Michele walked down the driveway. She locked the gate because she had heard Erica's 911 call connect, and she knew police might come. They did. 2 deputies were dispatched to the property in response to the hang-up call. They arrived at the gate. It was locked. They didn't investigate further. If they had forced their way in, they might have found 6 bodies still warm. Instead, they left, and Michele and Joe drove away into the night. 2 days passed. December 26, 2007. Judy Anderson didn't show up for work at the Carnation post office. Her best friend and co-worker, Linda Thiele, knew something was wrong. Judy never missed work without calling. Linda drove to the Anderson property. The gate was locked, so she walked around it and went up to the front door. She knocked. No one answered. She opened the door, and then she saw them, bodies on the floor. Scott Anderson, face down, Erica beside him, their young son Nathan nearby. At first, Linda thought it might be carbon monoxide poisoning. She was about to drag Scott outside when she saw the bullet wound in his head. Then she saw more bodies. Little Olivia was hidden behind her mother. Linda hid in a back bedroom and called 911. Oh, God, I'm in the other room. There's a baby and a man and a woman, and she's my best friend. The bodies of Wayne and Judy were found outside, in the shed where Michele and Joe had hidden them. About 3 hours after police arrived at the scene, a pickup truck pulled up the property. Michele Anderson and Joseph McEnroe. They claimed they had driven to Las Vegas to elope. They said they got lost and came back. But investigators noticed something strange immediately. Neither of them asked about the family. Neither of them asked why there were so many police cars. Neither of them showed any concern. They were brought in for questioning, and within hours, both of them confessed. Michele's confession lasted over 2 hours. For the first 45 minutes, she stuck to her story, the Las Vegas trip, the wrong turns, the innocent return. But when detectives pressed her, she cracked. It's not Joe's fault. It's all me. She described everything. How she shot at her father, but the gun jammed. How Joe killed both parents. How they cleaned up the blood and hid the bodies. How they waited for Scott's family to arrive. How she shot her brother. How Joe killed Erica and the children. When asked why she did it, Michele said she was tired of everybody stepping on her. She was upset that her parents asked her to pay rent. She was angry that her brother wouldn't repay the $40,000 she claimed he owed her. She felt her parents had sided with Scott over her, so she decided to kill them all. When asked how long she had planned the murders, Michele answered, 2 weeks. And when asked about the children, why 2 innocent kids had to die, her answer was almost casual. I just thought if they saw their parents dead, they'd be scarred for life. As if she was doing them a favor. After confessing, Michele said something that revealed exactly who she was. As soon as I shot the gun, I felt so bad, like what the hell have I done? I'm a monster. For one brief moment, she seemed to recognize the horror of what she had done. But it didn't change anything. 6 people were still dead, and Michele Anderson would never take responsibility. You might think that with 2 full confessions, the case would move quickly. It didn't. The legal proceedings dragged on for years. Both Michele and Joseph McEnroe were charged with 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. Both initially faced the death penalty, but Michele refused to cooperate with her own defense attorneys. She wouldn't speak to them. She refused to be interviewed by psychologists. For years, the case stalled. Joseph McEnroe's trial came first. In March 2015, he was found guilty on all 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, his defense argued that he had a traumatic childhood and was controlled by Michele. The jury didn't sentence him to death. On May 13, 2015, Joseph McEnroe was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He is currently imprisoned at Washington State Penitentiary. Michele Anderson's trial began in late 2015. Prosecutors played her 2-hour confession for the jury. They presented crime scene photos. They called 38 witnesses. The defense called none. Michele was the only witness her attorneys considered calling, and she refused to testify. On March 4, 2016, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on all 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. On April 21, 2016, Michele Anderson was formally sentenced. Judge Jeffrey Ramsdell refused to waste time addressing her directly. Instead, he spoke to the secondary victims, the relatives, friends, first responders, and jurors who had been traumatized by the case. You have all suffered tremendous losses, he said. Fortunately, this lengthy chapter of your nightmare is almost over. Erica's mother, Pam Mantle, addressed Michele directly in court. When you shot her, she called 911 not just to save herself, but to save her babies because she knew you'd kill them, too. I don't think you're big and tough, Michele. I think you're a bully and a coward. I am brokenhearted. Every day I miss those 6 people. Michele Anderson was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. She is currently imprisoned at the Washington Corrections Center for Women. There was one person who should have been at the Christmas Eve gathering that night. Mary Anderson, Michele's older sister. She had planned to attend, but she was sick, so she stayed home. That decision saved her life. Mary later testified at Michele's trial. She told her sister that she would have plenty of time in prison to think about her crimes. "It kills me. I loved you so much," she said. "Just know they loved you." Those words, "they loved you," are perhaps the most devastating part of this entire story. Because Wayne and Judy Anderson did love their daughter. Scott loved his sister. They invited her into their home on Christmas Eve. They trusted her, and she repaid that trust with bullets. Wayne Anderson was 60 years old, a retired Boeing engineer, a husband, a father, a grandfather. Judy Anderson was 61 years old, a postal carrier who never missed a day of work, a devoted mother and grandmother. Scott Anderson was 32 years old. He worked in construction. He was a loving husband and father. Erica Anderson was 32 years old, a mother who, in her final moments, screamed for her children's lives. Olivia Anderson was 5 years old. She was supposed to have a sleepover at her grandmother's house the next day. Nathan Anderson was 3 years old. He never got to open his Christmas presents. They were ordinary people. They did nothing wrong. They simply trusted the wrong person. And on Christmas Eve 2007, they paid for that trust with their lives. The Carnation Christmas Eve Massacre is a reminder that evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from family. Sometimes it sits at your dinner table. Sometimes it waits for you to arrive and then pulls the trigger. Michele Anderson will spend the rest of her life in prison. Joseph McEnroe will never be released. But no sentence can bring back what was lost. 3 generations, 6 lives, 1 family, destroyed from within. Wayne Anderson, Judy Anderson, Scott Anderson, Erica Anderson, Olivia Anderson, Nathan Anderson. May they rest in peace. If this story affected you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Mystery Archives Daily for more true crime stories told with depth and respect. Leave a comment below. What do you think drove Michele Anderson to commit such an unspeakable act? I'll see you in the next one.